Hi everybody, I'm Scoutmaster Dave Lucas, and I'm so glad to have you watching this video today on the Merit Badge on chess. We have with us a very special guest who's going to guide us through this Merit Badge. So welcome. If you're a scout, you're going to want to have to get this book. Now I know that you can go online and just get the requirements, but that won't work for this, and our guest, who is your Merit Badge counselor, won't let you do that. So you'll need to get this chess book from Scouting, the Merit Badge series on chess, the book from there, from Boy Scouts of America. Make sure it's the official one, because that's what we're using as our text and our guide. With me today in this video is our good friend and great chess player, Mr. Andrew Thomas, known better to us affectionately as Andy. Andy, thanks for being a part of this video.
Thank you for having me. So basically what I want to do today is do a nice outline, not only of the requirements, but actually show you some of the different techniques, some of the tactics and things. We're going to discuss, for instance, decoy, undermining defender. We're going to discuss all kinds of stuff. So anyway, buckle up. It's going to be fun.
That's right. And what we will do is we will give you Andy's contact information, and for you scouts who might be a little ways off, wherever you are, Andy could get you through this Merit Badge if that's what you decided to do. But you will need to make sure you've got an adult to correspond with and copy, and then he's going to copy me as a Scoutmaster to make sure that all the communication between himself and a minor or a young scout would be appropriate, okay? So, Andy, I suppose what we ought to start doing is go through some of these requirements, right?
Absolutely.
Once again, I want to tell you that you have to get this book before you begin this, and of course, you have to get the Merit Badge signed, the blue card signed by your scout leader or by your scout master. So make sure that you, number one, get this book, and then have somebody sign off your blue card to do the Chess Merit Badge. And then we can work it out where you can contact Andy. So with all that said, Andy, let me start off on the requirements, and you can kind of explain to them. First requirement says, discuss with your Merit Badge counselor, which is you, the history of the game of chess, and explain why it's considered a game of planning and of strategy.
Okay, well, to start off about the history, the game was originally called Chaturanga.
Chaturanga. That doesn't sound Chaturanga. That doesn't sound Chinese.
No.
I thought
It's
it was
actually
Chinese.
I did too originally, but when I started investigating it, I found out that the game was actually an Indian game.
Wow.
And back in the 1500 AD, right around that period, is when it started moving around to different areas. It moved to Europe and to Persia and just different. It started moving around. So and it became popular. Now, one thing I would like to do is explain to you the different pieces in Chaturanga.
Okay. All right. Pieces found in modern. The first one was the chariot.
Okay, the chariot is now known as the rook. It moves vertically and horizontally. And notably, if there's something in its way, it can capture that piece. But back in those days, these pieces, they could only move 2 squares. We can go on to the next one.
Okay.
Yeah, this.
The next one is the one they have here called the horse.
Yeah, the horse is also known as the knight today. And as I was doing some reading about it, I found out that it actually moves the same way as it did back then. And that is in an L shape. So you can jump your own pieces with this particular piece, known as the knight today, but the horse back then. So basically you would move over the pawn, you go 1, 2, 3, 4 squares, counting the square it starts on. So, but it goes up and over. Or if you had a pawn up, for instance, it could go.
Could it go here?
It could go there.
Yes.
It's one thing that I'm going to discuss is central control, because it's very important that you develop toward the center of the board. So for instance, you would want your pawns to be here in the center because they control more squares. And by getting these pieces, getting these pawns out in the center, it also opens up for your other pieces to get out. So it's very important to get the central control.
Okay. We've got the horse done. What about the elephant?
Yeah, this one, I don't know where they got this
Well, if
idea.
it were India, they had a lot of elephants, and they use elephants.
Yeah, well, the elephant is also known today as the bishop, and the bishop, and of course you have to have a clear diagonal to use your bishop, but they move on the diagonals. This is a light square diagonal, as you can see. This is the dark square diagonal.
Oh, so they're on each one. They're on each diagonal.
Yes, and the elephant could only go 2 squares at that time. But of course, you know, as things progressed, the game has changed quite a bit.
So you probably surmise that when this moved out of India and entered into Europe in the 1500s, right at the height of the glory of the church, so to speak, that a lot of this got changed because of the way England, France, even Germany, they had a lot of kings and queens and so forth.
Absolutely.
And they didn't have any elephants.
I would say that has a lot to do with it.
All right, next is the foot soldier, and I think you were kind of messing
well,
with those
these are your foot soldiers, or infantry. Infantry, yes.
Yeah.
Trying to say it. Okay, so basically, today they're called pawns, and they can move 2 squares on the first move, or 1 square, whichever way. There are some unique things about the pawns that you need to know, and I'll go ahead and explain that to you now. You can move 1 or 2 on the first move. Obviously, if going 2 squares gives you a little more control over your opponent's territory. So one thing that they didn't do back then is they didn't castle. But as of today, you're able to castle. So I'm going to show you how that works. Castling, in order to castle, you can castle on the king side or on the queen side. And when I say the king side, that's where the king and over
And that's
is the
the
king
tallest
side.
piece, right? The
Yes.
king is 3.
Okay, so right now I'd like to demonstrate how pawns can be used in a way to protect your king. Normally, in order to do what's called castling, you have to have your pieces developed. This is known as the king side, from the king over to the rook. That is known as the king side. And from the king over to the other rook, well, actually from the queen over to the other rook is known as the queen side. Now I'll demonstrate how this works. We would have to have our pieces developed before you can castle. And basically when you castle, you move your rook over 2 squares and the king jumps the rook.
Now, what's the advantage of doing that? Does that take the king out of the line of fire? Is that what that's for?
Yes, that's a good question. So basically, you've got a little more protection around your king.
Oh, I see.
So you've got your rook, your knight, your pawns. You got more protection around your king.
And you put him in a little pocket.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. It's
Yeah.
a safety zone.
Oh, I see.
If you have your king in the center and your opponent's able to open the center, then your king gets into trouble.
Exposed. He's
Exactly.
exposed.
Exactly.
It's pretty cool.
So this is castling, and on the king side. Now, to castle on the queen side, you would have to have your queen's side pieces over. So this bishop would need to be out of the way. This knight would have to be out of the way. But in addition, the queen has to be out of the way. And in this case, the rook is going to come all the way over to the queen square, and the king jumps the rook.
And that's
So
all considered one move.
That's one move.
You don't have to do that in two moves. That's all
No,
considered.
that's all one move. And there are some advantages and disadvantages to each. One of the advantages, in some positions, if your opponent has castled on the king side and you've castled on the queen side, it becomes a race to see who can get to the opponent's king first. Because the king is the most important piece of the game. If your king gets checkmated, you lose.
And
So
we'll talk more about checkmate later
yes.
on.
Yes. So I wanted to show you that and how pawns play a role in castling. But pawns, there's one other rule that I want to show you with pawns, and that is, well, first of all, pawns also capture diagonally.
Not forward.
Not forward. They did back in Chaturanga. They would capture forward. Now it's diagonally. Okay? And the other thing about a pawn is, let's say I have my pawn all the way up into your territory on the 5th rank. These are known as ranks, and these are known as files.
This is file. This is rank.
Exactly.
Rank and file.
Rank and file. So once you get your pawn up to the 5th rank, and let's say your opponent pushes past your pawn, not all the way up here, but up to the 2nd square for them, you're able to do something called en passant, which means on passing. It's a French term. And what you do is you capture it. It's the only time that you can capture it like this.
Oh, so you don't take it here.
No.
You actually move forward and take it off the board that way.
Exactly.
Oh.
So that's called en passant. It was known as en passing. It's the French term. So important to know that, because if you're in a tournament and your opponent does it and you don't know, you have to go get a tournament director and it gets confusing. So you definitely need to know all these rules.
Now, another thing about these foot soldiers, these poor pawns that we throw as cannon fodder in the fray, they don't ever retreat.
They can never move backwards. That's right. And that's one other thing that's important about it is these other pieces can move backwards. So if you have your queen all the way up here and it gets attacked, you can move your queen back and get it out of harm's way. But once this pawn gets up here, it can't come back. So if you overextend, and I can show you an example, if you overextend this pawn, it can become a weakness. It becomes a liability. So you don't want your pawn to become too overextended. You want to keep it back unless you have, there are times, like if you're going to attack, that you would want to
Right,
push.
if you've got a strategy to figure it out, if you've got an attack plan.
Exactly, exactly.
Now, who in the world is the minister?
Okay, now this is going to sound kind of funny, but the minister is the queen. The queen back then could only move 2 squares, I believe it was 2 squares in any direction. So, I mean,
Right.
but, and then of course back then, the other one, the king, it didn't move back then.
Oh, it didn't move at all.
It didn't move. They
Wow.
didn't have castling back then. Now they do, and it's a lot better.
So
But
the queen sort of again, if from the European standpoint, becomes sort of second in command. They sort of
yes.
recognize, whereas the minister was with the ruler,
Yes.
and so that was the way that sort of worked in those days. That the women were as critical until you get over into Europe, where that queen exercised a lot of power.
A
Right?
lot of power.
And
yes.
that ruler, you can go ahead and talk about the ruler. I sort of let
Okay.
the cat out of the bag.
Yeah, the ruler, the king, as we would say today, you had to pretty much, using strategy, figure out how best to keep your ruler protected. And if you can't castle, that means you got to keep the center closed. And we'll talk about that a little more in depth a little later. But a wide open position would be like maybe this, where your pieces can come out real quick and you develop real quick. But a closed position would be more like this, where everything is just kind of compact, and it's difficult for things to move around.
Now, I want to pause here and say that all of you should know that everything that Andy has gone through so far is spelled out very clearly in your chess book manual that comes from Boy Scouts of America. So it's important for you to make sure you get this booklet to read through along with Andy here as we go through this, or at a later time maybe you could read through this, then watch the video over again so that you can be up to speed and make sure that you know all you need to know to pass this, to get this merit badge. So I noticed that all those movements were in there, and there's a set of chess boards that are in here, so it's all very clear and it's important for you to have. Now, let's talk a little bit about some things I think you've got here marked for me, Andy. Checkmates, or quick checkmates, and how to set those up.
Oh.
The first one's called the fool's mate, and I hope that's not me, because I'm on the other side of the chess player here, the man we've come to make this video. So,
Well,
you should probably show
I'm
us
going to
the
show you
fool's
these.
mate.
I'm going to show you these, but I highly recommend you don't use them when you go to a tournament, because most people will know how to stop them. But the fool's mate is actually known as the 4-move checkmate. Normally what White wants to do is get his bishop and his queen lined up on this pawn, because this kind of battery situation can lead to a checkmate. So for instance, let's say on the second move I bring my bishop out and you bring your knight out to c6. By the way, the chessboard is lettered and numbered. That's how we know the notation. We're only going to talk about algebraic notation today. We will not be talking about descriptive notation. That's the old notation. If you get an older book, it will be in descriptive notation, I guarantee you. But in today's world, we use algebraic notation. So it goes A, B, C, D, all the way to H, and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. And I'll show you a little bit more in detail. But the checkmate, basically the way the checkmate goes, you either move your queen to F3 or to H5. Either one of these will work, and then the idea is your bishop defends the queen, and that creates the checkmate, because you're putting the king in check, and the king can't move. It's totally blocked in.
So he can't move, take the queen, because he would move into check.
Yes, exactly.
And he's into check here.
Exactly.
So that's a pretty quick, and that's called the fool's mate, I guess because it's so simple and it happens so quickly, right?
Yes, yes, yes. And
Have
then
you used that?
I did when I was a novice.
Did it work?
A couple of times, but people caught on.
They get caught on. So you could probably do that if you played another scout who hadn't had Andy's lesson, but then after that they would catch on pretty quickly, wouldn't they?
Yes. There are ways. I mean, you can put a knight up here, for instance, and block out the queen. So,
Oh, I see.
yeah.
Okay, the next one I think is called, now this one sounds more appropriate, the Scholar's Mate.
Yes, yes, okay. Now the way this one works is normally we would open up our king, which is not really good, but you're opening up the king to an attack. And then black obviously wants to get his queen here on this diagonal where he can checkmate you.
Right.
So he's going to play his pawn up here to, or he could play it here, either way, but this is normally where it goes. And then white just says, I'm not going to leave any ways for me to defend. And you just bring your queen all the way down, it's check, and it's mate. There's nothing you can put in the way to block it.
So that's it.
That's it.
Because the pawn can attack the queen sideways.
And normally you could put a pawn in front of the queen to defend.
Right.
But once you've moved the pawn, remember,
You've committed.
You can't move it backwards. So
You've committed.
That's it.
Well, that's pretty good. That's called the Scholar's Mate.
Yes.
Now let's talk a little bit about middle game. That sounds like something out of Middle World or Middle Earth. What is middle game?
Okay. Well, I actually have to explain something first.
Okay.
Before we get to the middle game. There are 3 phases of the game. You've got your opening, which is normally about 7 to 10 moves. Your first 7 to 10 moves is known as the opening. Then you get to the middle game, which is where you've got your pieces developed. Now you got to come up with a strategy and use tactics to make things happen. For instance, if the goal of the game is always to checkmate your opponent's king. But if you can win a piece, then you can take it into an end game and it'll make it easier to win because you've got an extra piece. So middle game. All right, middle game strategy. I'm going to start by just putting some pieces out, and I'll give black a few moves too. All right, so middle game strategy would be to maybe you want to attack this point, right? Because it's the weakest point in the position at this point.
Right.
So let's say this opening is known as the fried liver attack, believe it or not.
Did you say fried liver?
Yes, believe it or not. This is the it starts out of the 2 knights defense, but then you play this move right here. It's known as the fried liver. And there are many different ways that this can go, but normally black is going to play this.
So you're going to bring this up to G5, your horse,
Exactly.
your knight, and
But the point is, I want to hit this point so hard and so quick that you don't have time to stop my attack.
Right.
So the only thing that black has several ways to respond, but this is a middle game position. I just want to make that clear. This is not
an opening.
This is we've just moved into the middle game phase.
Yes.
So at this point, black has several different possibilities. I mean, obviously, this, if the knight got here, would be a fork, and we don't want that because that means if your queen moves, you're still going to lose a rook.
Yes.
See, it hits 2 pieces at once, and that's a fork.
And the king can't come here again because the king would be in check.
Yes. Yes. So we're now past getting your pieces out. Now we're getting into strategy and how to fulfill our strategy through tactics.
Sounds like that the secret to strategy too is to remember with great clarity how each piece moves and to be able to scope the board out to see where you could bring pieces to play like you've done here, like with this knight here, the bishop there. That seems to be a calculated set of moves that you sort of worked into and that hoping your opponent didn't see you doing.
Yes, exactly.
Right.
Exactly. Now, So we got into the middle game. I didn't discuss the opening all that much yet, but we will come back to that because that's very important, and we will get to end games, but that'll be a little later too. So one of the things that you need to know is when you're playing, your opponent is going to have a strategy and you have a strategy. And sometimes your main goal is to interfere with your opponent's strategy, to slow your opponent down while you speed up your plan. But there are many different tactics that are used to do this.
Where can a person find out about tactics? I mean, this is a merit badge to explain the overview of chess and why it's so much fun. But later, after the scout gets this merit badge, but has say, well, I really like this. Do you read books? Do you watch videos? Is it on YouTube? Where, or all of the above?
All of the above. And this was a really good question. I'm glad you brought that up.
Thank you.
So basically, there are several sources that I use. One of the sources I use to get my chess books and chess videos is known as the Chess House. And their phone number is 1-800-348-4749.
And that is not a paid advertisement.
And you can also go to www.thechesshouse.com.
They sell games, or exactly what is the Chess House?
They will sell the boards, the sets.
I see.
They sell the clocks.
Yeah.
They sell chess books. They sell chess videos. They pretty
great.
much anything under the sun.
Everything about chess.
The other one is that I'm going to recommend, that I'm actually going to recommend to you, is the United States Chess Federation, known as the USCF. And the reason I recommend that is because if you want to play in tournaments, you have to become a member, and there is a membership fee. I'm not exactly sure. It might be like $25.
Yeah, but it may change too.
It could change. For adults, it's closer to $60 a year. But for juniors, if you're a scholastic player, for instance, it would be a lot less. And if you want to play in tournaments, that's also interesting because in a tournament, you put in what's called an entry fee, and it goes into the pot, the general pot. But then if you win your section, you get all that money that everyone put in for that section.
Wow, I didn't know that either.
So you can actually make some good money doing that.
You could pay your parents back if you didn't have your license. Here's some gas money. Thanks for bringing me. But before they can do tournament work, they have to get this merit badge, and then they have to move on and so on.
So I wanted to tell you the way you would contact the United States Chess Federation. They actually have two websites. One is for once you become a member, you can go in and access data that you want to get from your site. Like if you want to get if you want to look at their magazine online, you would go to that site. The one that you would order from is www.uscfsales.com.
Very good. So do you want to go through and show us your favorite opening?
Yes.
That way we could talk a little bit more about openings.
This one's actually one of my favorites, the fried liver attack. And it does have a really funny name.
Do you eat fried liver?
Chicken livers.
Chicken livers.
I do like chicken livers fried.
Show us your favorite opening.
Okay, so I want to show you one for white and one for black.
Oh, that's a good idea.
So for white, one of the easiest and one of the most well-known openings is called the Ruy Lopez, named after a. It was named after a monk His name was Ruy Lopez, and so they named it after him. And basically, I'm going to explain what is going on in this opening so you get a little idea. Because we're on the E square, it's also the king's first move, but it's on the E square. We're moving E 1, 2, 3, 4, E4. Okay, and black responds with E5. So this is 8, 7, 6, 5. That's how you can move it either way, but that's how you come up with the notation. And then white's going to play his knight to F3, F3.
And keeping that center focused, like you said, in the center of the board.
Yes, that's one of the most important concepts, because you can build an attack if you have real good central control.
Right.
So the knight is going to start on B8, and it's going to go to B7, B6, C6. Knight to C6, and then the bishop is going to come out to B5. Now, what people are wondering, what is the point behind this opening? Well, there is a tactic known as undermining a defender. And we're going to talk about that in pretty good detail in a little bit. But the point of this is to take the knight with the bishop, and then because this knight no longer guards this pawn, we can win this pawn at some point. So you leave your options open. I mean, if he attacks your bishop right away, you have to make a decision. Do I want to keep the bishop? Because in certain positions, the bishop is a little more powerful than the knight. Even though they're both worth 3 points, the bishop in open positions can be better than a rook, which is worth 5 points.
Right.
And in certain positions, this knight is better than a rook. So you have to make the judgment call. It's a matter of preference. Bobby Fischer, he was one of the greatest chess players of all time. He used to like to take the knight. And after the pawn recaptures, normally they capture away from the center. It's not, the traditional way is to capture toward the center. But in this particular case, they capture away from the center so that they can get their pieces out.
I see.
But the point is, you can't take this out. Well, let me show you. All right. So the bishop takes the knight. The pawn takes back on C6. And now there's a little trick. If white takes this pawn right away, the queen comes in to D4, forking the pawn and the knight. So when the knight goes back, you win your pawn back. So that's why you can't take the pawn right away. You've got to castle first.
Oh, to get your king out of the
So there will be
line
no
of fire.
check. There will be no check.
Right.
Another thing that's important to know. Let's say I castle, and now one of the most common moves is bishop to G4. But let's say you make a move like this, thinking I'm going to counterattack, and I'll counterattack your pawn. I can take the pawn. If you take my pawn, I just move my rook over, and now I'm creating a little problem for your king because it's stuck in the center. I mean, you can try to defend your knight, but I can attack it with a pawn and win your knight. And if you move your knight away, I have check, winning your queen, because I'm attacking your queen and you're putting check at the same time.
Oh yeah, so you've got this piece here, which is going to take the queen, and this piece here when you've got him in check, and you have to deal with that first, don't you?
Well, this piece has to be dealt with first. This is the king.
Oh, king, yeah, I'm sorry.
And so you would have to block it and then just lose your queen. I mean, it's that simple.
Because once this is in check, you can't do anything else but remove the threat, right?
Yes, and that little tactic that I showed you is known as a double attack. It's a fork, but it's also a double attack because I'm attacking your king and I'm attacking your queen. So that's one that's in your book.
And it's important for them to learn this vocabulary too, isn't it?
Yes.
That's why we have merit badges, so you can learn about these issues, and in this case, chess, but also these booklets. And I want to emphasize again, don't rely just on that instruction sheet that you can get in several different scouting.coms and scouting.orgs. Don't rely on that. You need to go get your book from the Scout store, your trading post, or from online to get this chess, and try to get the most updated one. It's a great book. It's got a lot of good examples in it, and so we'll make sure you get this booklet to earn the merit badge. Now,
Okay.
you're going to show me a black.
A black opening, yes, yes. Okay, so if white and black normally want to get their center pawns out as quick as possible because it opens up for their bishops to come out. The knights normally move before the bishops, but so I'm going to show you an opening. It's a little unorthodox. It's known as the Sicilian defense.
Oh, Italian.
Yes, exactly. Sicily. And so white normally, to go into the open Sicilian, he'll play his knight to f3. And in most cases, not all cases, but in a lot of cases, black is going to play his pawn to d6. And the point behind that is to stop a piece from getting in, or, you know, some problems. It's kind of a crouched position, kind of like there's another position called a hedgehog, which when you think of a hedgehog, he's kind of stuck back, he's creeping, he's, you know, just holding his ground. But this opening normally we'll just go a few moves into it. Okay, so black gets to attack first. He attacks the e4 pawn. And white is on the defense. He has to defend his pawn. Mm-hmm. And then there are multiple ways to play this. One is to put your bishop on this diagonal, which is a really good diagonal. One way is to play this move, a6, to stop a piece from invading on the b5 square. Mm-hmm. And it also allows you to maybe kick this knight when it no longer has this key square to go to. But this is known as a Sicilian defense. And of course, there are openings that when people start with the queen pawn opening, but we have kind of limited time, so we're not going to go in too deep.
Okay.
Too deep.
Well, and again, a lot of this is in this booklet,
Exactly.
and you can kind of read through it slowly, then go back and look at the video if you'd like.
So
after that.
I did want you to hit on the tactics.
Okay.
Because and that'll be back here in the middle game section.
Okay. All right.
It talks about decoy and
That's
removing
right.
the
Yeah.
defender, and yeah, it's in the middle game section. But it's those are the key. Anytime you have a strategy, you have to have some way to fulfill your goal. And that's known as tactics, using tactics. And it's the same way in military warfare. You know, they use tactics to accomplish their goals.
Those are called chess tactics, right?
Yes.
The decoy.
Okay, so a decoy would be normally a sacrifice. Mm-hmm. So what a sacrifice is when you give up something. You give up a pawn or you give up a piece. But a decoy would be, let's say I have a position where I'm just going to set up a position, and I have this open file, and I'm going to try to set up an example here. You've castled, and a decoy might be something, a sacrifice like this.
So you're
where-
actually moving your bishop down into the king's area,
Yes.
and here by that knight.
Yes, and see, the knight can take it.
Right.
See, you've just decoyed the knight away from its defending post. Now that that knight is gone, we bring our queen up, but now we've created what's called a battery. You've got a rook right behind the queen, so when the knight goes back, you got checkmate.
Wow, that was fast.
Yeah, decoys are it's a very good tactic to know.
You may want to go back and look at that again. That's in your book, Chess Tactics, here, and it's called The Decoy. And what about you've already talked about the fork. That's
Yes. Now, there are different forks. I
Right.
mean, a knight fork would be like in the case where we had the knight coming here, forking the queen and rook.
I see.
That's a knight fork. But you
Because
can
a
also...
fork is like either or.
Yes,
Is that correct?
exactly.
It's either or.
And if you had a piece like this, and I wanted to fork your king and rook, I could just take with the bishop instead of the knight,
Right.
and now your king has to sidestep, and I just take your rook. So
Right.
that's a bishop fork.
Right.
But you can do it with really any piece except the king. The
Right.
king can only move in one direction except when castling.
Right, exactly. What about a discovered attack?
Okay, I'll show you a very good example of a discovered attack.
Thank you.
I think we've really already talked about it a little bit, but I'll show you again. In the example of the Ruy Lopez, where
okay.
we gave up, we got this pawn, we've castled, this is already gone, and his king is still in the center. Okay, and we've castled, and he takes this pawn.
Yes, I remember that.
Okay, this is setting up a discovered attack.
Okay, that's
when
what's
the knight
called
moves,
a discovered attack.
it's check. It discovers an attack on the
Okay.
queen and the king.
So in other words, it's sort of uncovered. It's sort of revealed from way back in the back of the rank and file. That's pretty
exactly.
cool. That's pretty
exactly.
cool. And you've already shown us the double attack.
Yes,
Right.
and really the double attack is very similar to a fork
Right,
because you're hitting two pieces at once.
right.
And
So we've talked about the openings. We've talked about the middle game. Now let's talk about end games.
okay, now end games are a little more complicated, but that's one of the Jose Raul Capablanca, who learned how to play chess at the age of 4, believe it or not. He said that in chess, you should start with the end game and work your way backwards. He actually suggested that you learn end games before you learn anything else.
Because he wanted you to work toward that goal like you would do in business. In business, you sort of imagine what you want to happen before you start doing it.
And you can actually develop your whole strategy by working backwards.
Right. Well, they
Yeah.
do that a lot in time management. In time management, if we're going to have a project that's going to have to be done by the 4th of July, you start doing your calendar backwards. What do you have to have done the week before? What do you have to have done 2 weeks before, et cetera? So it makes a lot of sense, and it does help you with the idea of strategy and preparation.
Now, I would just like to just show some just real basic, real basic end games. You can have king and pawn end games, you can have queen and pawn end games, you can have king and rook end games, you can have knight end games. There are a whole host of end games. I mean, we could spend hours going over that.
And you could spend a lifetime learning more, right?
Yes, yes. But let's just let's just take a bunch of pieces off the board and just focus on a king and a pawn.
Okay.
Okay, so we just imagine that these pieces aren't here. Okay. Now, there are certain things that you have to know about these type of endgames. One thing you have to know is something called opposition. You've got relative opposition and you've got distant opposition.
Relative opposition and what?
Distant,
Distant
opposition. So if my king is here, and let's say your king is here, how would you know which king has the opposition?
I have no idea.
It actually goes by how many squares are between each king. So so let's count let's just kind of count this out.
That's why people say there's math involved in chess.
Oh, yes, you have to calculate your moves just like you would math problems. So if I come up, depending on if it's white or black to move, that can make a difference too. But let's assume it's white to move. I come up, you come up, I come up. Now, guess what? White has the opposition. I force you away. So now what I may be able to do is cut a corner. Cut a corner. But if you can come up here, then maybe you gain opposition. So keeping opposition is tricky. Keeping opposition, getting opposition is one thing, but keeping opposition is another thing. There is also something called the square of the pawn. That's very important to know in an endgame. If, let's say my king is here and your king is here, okay, and I have a pawn right here. Can black catch my pawn? If it's white to move, can he catch my pawn? No, because I move, you move up, and then I promote. So I'm more likely going to get a queen. And then you'll get checkmated by my king and my queen. This is called promotion. When your pawn gets to the back rank, it's promoted. And you can promote to any piece except a king. So if you had a situation, I'll give you an example. If you had a situation like this, and white promotes, he might want to promote to a knight. Because if he promotes to a knight, he's now forking the king and queen.
Right, it's an automatic fork.
So you don't always just promote to a queen. You have to. There's strategy involved.
Depends on the end game.
Yes.
That's why they name all those movies and books end game.
Yes. And I showed you the example from white to move, but if it's black to move, black is in the square of the pawn. You see, he's in the square of the pawn. So if black moves, he's going to catch this pawn. So it does matter who's to move.
Yeah, that's good. That's good.
Those are just some basic ideas. When we actually go over, there are a lot of in-game positions that we have to go over in the book. So when we do go over those, and it'll more than likely either be on a FaceTime or in person, if you live within a reasonable distance.
Right. We could set something up though, even if we had set up another video that he could do a chat.
But there are a lot of end games in there.
Right, right. And again, he's referring to the chess book, which is very, very thorough, very important. And again, you should get this merit badge booklet. Don't depend on those instructions. And I'm not casting shade on those instructions. They do give you a kind of a clarity what you're supposed to do. But in this particular case, this has everything you need to know in it, and it's very, very important. Now let's get to the back of the book, kind of our conclusion of our video here. Types of tournaments, because they have to sort of set up a tournament, right?
Yeah, this is, I think this is number 6 in your requirements. You have a couple of options. You can play a little mini match where you have 2 or 3 friends and you play, you have to like set up a little cross table.
Right.
It's real easy to do. You set up the names vertically and then set them up horizontally at the bottom. You're making a graph basically, but it's called a cross table. And basically you can do just a couple of people. You would want to create a video of you playing the tournament so that me and your Scoutmaster can actually verify that you did complete the tournament. But what happens is there are several different types of tournaments. You have one where
excuse me.
You have one tournament where that's a little more informal, and you would basically it's called a round robin tournament. It's in your book too, but you would play every player twice, and the person that has the most points at the end wins. That's called a round robin tournament.
So and this 6, as you've so well remembered, is play at least 3 games of chess with other scouts. So the Scoutmaster could set this up, or the assistant Scoutmaster could set up a chess tournament among the scouts, and then they could, at the end of that, either send you an email or a video or FaceTime you, depending on the time, or if you couldn't get there, depending on how far away. If you're in Utah, it'd be a little difficult for him to get there in timely fashion. But one of the scout leaders, the unit leader, could sign off and say, here, they did this, and that way he could sign off on it if you want to do that. Because we can assign or appropriate that information and authority so that everybody gets that. The second one is play in a Scholastic Youth Chess Tournament. Now, when they play in this Scholastic Youth Tournament, do they have to have that membership in the Federation?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So you'd have to become, then when you're ready to do that, a member of the Federation.
Yes, but if now the game, I'll be honest with you, up front, you're going to beat your head up against a wall when you first start out.
Sure.
But once you get good at this game, it is a lot of fun, and there are a lot of things you learn. Concentration, you learn how, this is the same part of your brain that you use to do chess, is the same part of the brain that you use to do math and science.
So this is a STEM game, really. It's
Yes.
a STEM game.
This can help you academically.
Yeah.
It is a good,
That's
and,
good.
and in other countries, they teach chess as a subject in school.
Yeah, that's what I knew that. And also it's supposed to help you with music.
Yeah, music is also.
So if you're musically inclined. Then the last one is organize and run a chess tournament with at least 4 players. They could do this in their neighborhood as long as their scout leader signed off on it, plus they have to do it. And each competitor plays at least 2 games. So there's doable requirements here. It's not unduly burdensome. And this is a great book, and I've learned a lot just looking through it.
And I would also just at the end, concluding this video, I learned how to play chess in my high school. We had in homeroom, my homeroom teacher pulled out chess boards and suggested that we play chess and encouraged it. And, well, obviously I didn't know the rules, so I went home and said, hey, Dad, you need to pull out your chessboard and teach me chess.
Teach me how to do this.
And then I started getting books because, when you get beat up on for a while, you start thinking, maybe I should get me some books and start learning how to do this.
Yeah.
And then you get good at it.
This is the first one to get.
Yes.
Now this clock they don't have to have until later, is that correct?
If they get into a tournament,
In a tournament you'll have to use the clock.
to use a clock, yes.
So where can they get a chessboard if they want to go get a chessboard?
You can get it. The 2 places I use are the United States Chess Federation and the Chess House.
So you've already mentioned those. That's where you can get these. They're not super expensive.
No.
And these are nice pieces.
Yeah. Now these are wooden and they're double weighted, so these pieces are a little more expensive. But just the normal set that you get You get a rollout board just like this with the notation on the sides, and you also you would get the pieces. They're plastic, and you can get them weighted. You can get a single weight or a double weight, and you can get a whole set for $25. They're really inexpensive.
That's good.
The clock, a typical clock's going to cost you around $50.
So it's going to be a little more. That's why we suggest it. Right now, you get this book, and then after you read through it, you can order your chess set. And then later on, when you become, what was that Fisher's name?
Robert James Fisher, Bobby Fisher.
When you become Bobby Fisher, you can go get you a clock. Andy, thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
Yes.
We appreciate you watching, and we hope that you have a wonderful time with your Scout approved Merit Badge Booklet. I'm wearing that out, aren't I?
Yes.
Get yourself a chess set and have fun. You can get all kinds of entrepreneurial ideas with all of this and have a good time. Learn strategy, learn math, and just be equipped for better planning in your life. I hope that you are prepared now as a Scout to go out and get this Merit Badge. I'm going to ask Andy to give you his email, and please, all serious inquiries, no joking around with Andy. And you can send him questions, and we'll, of course, help, and you guys can get in contact then after that. So Andy's going to give you his email, copy it down, but we'll also have it here on the video.
Okay, my email address is 135overtherainbow246@gmail.com.
And that's not long at all.
That's to make sure I do not get hacked.
Oh, okay. One more time for them.
It's 135overtherainbow246@gmail.com.
And it's a Gmail, so, you know, we may end up starting a YouTube for chess, who knows. But thank you for watching. If you have any questions, please contact the Merit Badge Counselor, Mr. Andrew Thomas, better known to us as Andy. And we appreciate you watching. If you have any questions, let us know. I'm Dave Lucas. I'm Scoutmaster here in Ironton, Ohio. But we wanted to bring this to you so you could start your Chess Merit Badge. Buy your book and get your blue card signed, and you're off to scouting. Until later, thanks again for watching. This is Dave Lucas for Scouts. Keep it up. We'll talk to you later.